Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I feel so honored and special to be with you all the way in Tel Aviv, where I just saw geese walking through the airport on the tarmac on my YouTube.
All right. So
we're very happy to have you as well, and everyone that are here. I'm Atara Ben Hanan. I'm the producer of the Poetry Place International Zoom Festival. And I'm super excited that everyone came here. I think we were more than 100 people or even more. And I'm honored to introduce Tevat Dayan, the host of this conversation. She will present Dorianne Laux probably in a minute. So Maya is a poet and a writer. She holds a PhD in Sanskrit poetry, and she is the recipient of the Israeli Prime Minister Award for Literature for 2018. To Maya, some technical clarifications. Your microphones will be muted during the conversation, but you can write us in the chat box just down below. And we can see your comments and questions, and we'll pass them to Dorianne and Maya at the end of the session when we'll have time to ask them. So I hope you will enjoy this meeting. And Maya, you may begin.
Thank you. Thank you.
all right. Dorianne, we actually, it's a great honor for me to have this conversation with you. And for the past few years, I've been reading your poems and translating them and teaching my students and loving them. And you have an audience here that loves your poems and expects to hear what you have to say. We haven't really discussed properly how you wanted me to introduce you. I can read something from a Country Foundation, what they write about you, if that's okay. Is it okay with you? So Dorianne Laux is the author of several collections of poetry, including What We Carry, 94, a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. Book Fact About the Moon 2005, chosen by the Poet AI as a winner of the Oregon Book Award, and also a finalist for the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, the Book of Men 2011, which was awarded the Peterson Prize, and only as the day is long, new and selected. She has received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts, and has been a Pushcart Prize winner at least once, right? Or more?
A few, yeah, a few more.
A few, yeah, that's what I suspected. And we had a little chat a couple of days ago, and you let me. You said it's okay if I led the conversation, and so I thought it would be nice if we started right away with reading the poem before we start chatting. And the poem I thought would be nice to begin with is Facts About the Moon, which is going to be the longest poem we'll be reading in this session. And we'll read it, Dorianne, if you could please read it to us in English, and I will follow with the Hebrew, and then we can start talking, I think.
Great. I don't even have to read it out of my book. I can just read it right here on the screen.
Yeah.
Facts about the moon. The moon is backing away from us 1.5 inches each year. That means if you're like me and were born around 50 years ago, the moon was a full 6 feet closer to the Earth. What's a person supposed to do? I feel the gray cloud of consternation travel across my face. I begin thinking about the moonlit past, how if you go back far enough, you can imagine the breathtaking hugeness. Prehistoric solar eclipses when the moon covered the sun so completely there was no corona, only a darkness we had no word for. And future eclipses will look like this: the moon, a small black pupil in the eye of the sun. But these are bald facts. What bothers me most is that someday the moon will spiral right out of orbit and all land-based life will die. The moon keeps the oceans from swallowing the shores, keeps the electromagnetic fields in check at the polar ends of the Earth. And please don't tell me what I already know, that it won't happen for a long time. I don't care. I'm afraid of what will happen to the moon. Forget us. We don't deserve the moon. Maybe we once did, but not now, after all we've done. These nights, I harbor a secret pity for the moon. Rolling around alone in space without her milky planet, her only love, a mother who's lost a child, a bad child, a greedy child, or maybe a grown boy who's murdered and raped. A mother loves that boy anyway, and in spite of herself, she misses him. And if you sit beside her on the padded hospital bench outside the door to his room, you can't not her hand, listen to her while she weeps, telling you how sweet he was in his eyes. And you know she's romantic, that she's conveniently the bruises and booze, the car, the day he ripped the phones from the walls. And you anxiety. Remind her leech, fuck up, little shit, and you almost do, until she lifts her pale, puffy face, her eyes too clear. Then you help it either. You know love when you see it. You can feel lunar strength, its brutal pull.
מסביר ראו כך, הירח אישון שחור וזעיר בעינה של השמש. אבל אלו עובדות יבשות. מה שמטריד אותי באמת הוא שיום אחד הירח יסתחרר ויצא מהמסלול והחיים על פני האדמה ייגמרו. בזכות הירח, האוקיינוסים לא בולעים את החופים. השדות האלקטרומגנטיים נשמרים תחת שליטה בכתבים. ובבקשה, אל תגידו לי את מה שאני כבר יודעת, שזה לא צפוי לקרות עוד זמן רב. אתה את יכולה להוריד קצת? לא מעניין אותי. אני חוששת... איפה אנחנו עכשיו? איפה? אני...
למעלה. היינו...
לא, אני למטה. אני חוששת, כן?
נכון? ועכשיו למעלה.
לא, יש פה קפיצה כל פעם של ה... טוב, יש פה קפיצה כל פעם של הזה. אני אקרא פשוט מקובץ שלי, זה יהיה לי יותר קל אולי. אני חוששת ממה שיקרה לירח. תשכחו מאיתנו, אנחנו לא ראויים לירח. אולי היינו פעם, אבל לא עכשיו, אחרי כל מה שעשינו. בלילות האלה אני נושאת בליבי פרסי עלנה, שמעל ללא כוכב הלכת שלה. בנה יחיד. אמא שאיבדה ילד גדול, שרצח ואנס. אמא שלא יעזור כלום, אוהבת את הילד הזה, כך או כך. ושלמרות הכל, מתגעגעת אליו. ואם תתיישבו לצידה על הספסל המרופד של בית החולים, מחוץ לדלת החדר שלו, לא תוכלו שלא לאחוז בידה, להאזין לה. בשעה שהיא מתייפחת, מספרת איזה מתוק הוא היה, וכמה כחולות העיניים שלו. אתם יודעים שהיא רק מייפה הכל. שנוח לה לשכוח את המכות והאלכוהול, האוטו הגנוב, היום בו הוא תלש את הטלפונים מהקירות. אתם רוצים לסתור לה שתתעורר, להזכיר לה את האמת. הוא היה עלוקה, הוא היה דפוק, חתיכת חרה, ואתם כמעט עושים את זה. עד שהיא מרימה את פניה, החיוורים, הנפוחים, עיניה שני מכתשים, ויותר אין לכם ברירה. אתם מזהים אהבה כשאתם פוגשים בה, מרגישים את כוח הירח שלה, המשיכה האכזרית. So that was the Hebrew, Dorian. What do you think?
It's so beautiful. I mean, it really doesn't matter that I don't understand it because I still understand it. I understand the inflections and the emotion, and you know.
Right.
There are so many H sounds.
Yeah, that's right.
The throat sounds, which seems right, you know, for this poem. The words I recognized were historic, corona, and then I swore I heard telephone, but I swore I heard halal and shalom.
Yeah. So shalom, I don't think was there. Halal
Okay.
maybe, because
Yeah.
yeah, halal was there, that space, and we're going to talk about space and all that cosmic concept of yours. But first, I picked up this poem, and only after that I realized it had the word corona in it, and I figured people now forget the original word, the original meaning of corona. Now corona forever is going to be a pandemic, and people are forgetting it was first given to us by the moon. So first of all, I would like to ask you, how are you these days, these corona days? Where are you? What do you see from your window? The questions people ask now.
We're living in a little flat that a friend of ours is lending to us while we teach at North Carolina State for a semester. I'm on phased retirement. And outside, it's the 24th floor of this apartment building in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. So you can see the entire horizon from our balcony. And right down the street is the state. To see that 84 feet times to walk out onto the balcony. But I have planted a lot of little flowers on my balcony so that I can feel like I'm tending to something and helping it stay alive. But it's a small place, and we'll be moving from here, hopefully, back home, which is in California.
Okay. Can you write these days at all?
Yes, we've been writing, and we've been doing something that we do with our students all the time. And they're former students and other poet friends that we get together with once a week, and we give each other exercises, and then we go away for 40 minutes and write and come back and read what we've written to each other on Zoom. And we use this little thing called metaphor dice, and we give everybody a metaphor that you can get from the dice. And so one of the metaphors right now is beauty is an apologetic moon. That would be the metaphor. Or death is a bright thunderstorm. Or your body is a sacred promise. Or love is a small town wedding gown. So, and then everybody has to write a poem using that metaphor.
Right, that's cute. I actually won these dice here.
You can buy them online. Here, this is what they look like. You can go on...
Metaphor dice, okay.
It's made by a poet friend of mine.
All right, I'm already happy we had this conversation and we haven't even started. But on the commercial side, I'm happy. So it's a long poem, and it kind of gave me the same feeling I had when I first came across your poems. I actually remember the first time I read a poem of yours and how struck I was by the freedom it gave me. I received a huge freedom to kind of write, take my time, pay attention to tiny, tiny, delicate things, to be very compassionate for everything I feel, and especially for the questions that I cannot find answer to. I felt like you give me some kind of compassion. And since then, I've been repeatedly telling my students to read and read and read to get inspiration, because I remember what kind of inspiration I got from your poetry. And to begin with, I would like to ask you, how do you get inspiration? Where from, apart from the metaphor dice? And also to get some more knowledge about the process of making a poet, your process of making a poet, which I know that writing is only part of that. So how do you make a poet? How do you start? And how do you know that the poet is done, that it's there and you have it?
Well, I get my inspiration the same place you do from other poems. I mean, you know, I began reading poetry very young and fell in love with the rhythms and the rhymes. Mostly, I think, because my mother was a pianist. And so I was hearing music, and I loved when I saw that music could be translated into language, that language had its own music, you know, and beauty. And so I read other poets, and some of the first poets I read were, as I got older, were Sharon Olds. In this country is a very big poet.
Yeah.
Sharon Olds, Carolyn Forche. Also, I read Pablo Neruda and Miguel Hernandez, and you know, poets from all over the world. And it really opened up my idea of what a poem could be, and that poems could be written by living people. Number one, because I thought all the poets were dead, and I thought they were all white. I thought they were all old white men who used to write poems. And so when I discovered that women were writing poems, that people in Chile were writing poems, that people in Japan were writing poems long before us, you know, that poems came from everywhere in the world and anyone could write them, but especially women, that women could write poems. I looked at the poems of Izumi Shikibu, and I realized, oh, this has been going on. I have permission, just like you felt you had permission. I got permission from all these women throughout the centuries. And as far as making a poem, I think I've always been very interested in the small detail and in domestic life, which really hadn't been given a lot of, you know, it didn't seem to be a proper subject for poems. That poems should be about the big subjects: life, death, betrayal, you know, revenge, you know. And I thought, well, what about people who just live every day and stop and look at something while they're walking down the sidewalk? Or what about a woman buying groceries for her family? Or what about, you know, and a mother or a daughter or a sister or a brother. And so I wanted to write about those things. And I think that Sharon Olds and Carolyn Forche gave me a lot of permission to do that. And when you're speaking about the domestic life, or the life of a woman in general, they do tend to look at those small things. You know, they're very impressed and inspired by things that other people might pass by and think of as ordinary, that are really, if you look at them long enough, are actually quite extraordinary. A mother washing the dishes, you know, can be extraordinary.
Yeah, or kicking her 3 girls out of the house so she can have another conversation with another poet. Yeah, I wanted to write about that. And the process of making a poem, can you give us something about that, like some sort of insight into how you started and how do you know it's done? How do you know the poem is there?
I don't think we ever really know if a poem is finished completely. When I look at Facts About the Moon, I think, oh, I could have said so much more. Why didn't I say more? You know, or, oh, maybe I shouldn't have had that line. Maybe I could replace it with, you know, there's always something.
Even now, even today, now that you're ready, do you think like you still have those thoughts going on?
Not so much about that particular poem.
Okay.
But there are poems where I actually have changed a word. Like when it was published in a book, but then when I was going to have my new one selected, I decided, no, I'm going to replace this word with that word.
Yeah.
So in that way, but in the larger way, you know, when you're done, I think, when you get that sense of release and relief, you know, that you've at least gotten close to the thing that you wanted to say. Because the fact is, you never really capture it. You can't. It's impossible. It's like capturing the soul of a bird. You know, you can't do it. But you could give the weight of the bird, and you could give the song of the bird, and so I feel like I'm done when I've gotten as close as I can to that place. Whether or not I could tell you exactly that moment, I don't know. You know, I mean, I go back and revise a poem and decide that I've gone on too long, or I didn't say enough, or I need to start further down, or I need to take off the end and make this the end. You know, I mean, things happen in the revision phase. So the poem isn't done until it feels like you've shaped it like a sculptor would shape.
No, but you talked about the relief that you feel, and I can relate to that a lot. I know that feeling when the poem maybe is not done, but it's at least you're done with it for a while, which is also good enough, right? And I thought about it. I wanted to ask you something else, but because you said about you talked about capturing, trying to capture something, I thought it would be nice to read in that relation Dust, our next poem, and then talk about how we capture or not capture and what we capture at all. Hopefully it is going to be, Dust. Okay.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Dust. Someone spoke to me last night, told me the truth. Just a few words, but I recognized it. I knew I should make myself get up, write it down, but it was late, and I was exhausted from working all day in the garden, moving rocks. Now, I remember only the flavor, not like food, sweet or sharp, more like a fine powder, like dust. And I wasn't elated or frightened, but simply wrapped, aware. That's how it is sometimes. God comes to your window, all bright light and black wings, and you're just too tired to open it.
Thank you. אבק. מישהו דיבר עליי אתמול בלילה. אמר לי את האמת. רק כמה מילים ספורות, אבל אני זיהיתי אותה. ידעתי שעליי להעיר את עצמי ולרשום אותה, אבל היה מאוחר, והייתי מוטשת מעבודה, כל היום סחבתי סלעים בגינה. עכשיו אני זוכרת רק את הטעם, לא כמו של אוכל, מתוק או חריף, יותר כמו אבקה מעודנת, כמו אבק. ולא הייתי מרוממת רוח או מבוהלת, אלא פשוט מרותקת, פקוחה למתרחש. ככה זה לפעמים. אלוהים מגיע אל החלון שלך, כולו אור בהיר וכנפיים כהות, ואת פשוט עייפה מכדי לפתוח. I put it on Facebook yesterday, I think, or a couple of days ago, the Hebrew translation. And one of my readers said, she thinks you're the greatest researcher of dust that she's ever met. And I thought it was a great compliment. And then another one asked me to ask you a question. And she said that it seems like you know something about the unknown. And if you could please take us to a moment when you realize that you know. Yeah.
That's a very difficult question. I don't know that I know the unknown, but if I think about it for a moment, maybe we all do. I mean, I have a poet friend who says everybody knows everything, right? And I believe even if you don't know how the universe began, you kind of do. You know, I mean, maybe you can't imagine it, but you know it because it's in your body. I think everybody knows everything all the time. And it's just a matter of allowing yourself to be relaxed enough and to be open enough and to accept that you know everything and that your unconscious mind will reveal it to you if you're relaxed enough, if you trust it enough, if you are unafraid to go there, you know, to allow it to say what it needs to say. It's like on a scientific level, I mean, our brains are computers. They take in everything. They make connection. You know, that brain is just computing right along, making all these connections. You may not know them consciously, but your unconscious knows. And so sometimes when I write a poem and I'm finished with it and I look down and I think, I didn't really write that. I mean, I know I was writing, but I don't remember how did that happen? And I realized that something else was writing it. I was just allowing it to come through me. A lot of times I will say, I'm not smart enough to have written that poem. How could that be? I don't know that thing, you know? But we do. It's just if you trust yourself enough to allow that knowledge, which is in the unconscious and which is frightening for many of us. We don't want to know what we know, you know? But if you open yourself up to it, it will reveal itself. And if you're not frightened of it, if you accept it, that we're all human, that we all have had the same feelings for millennia. We're not feeling anything that any other human being on earth has felt or thought or, you know, on some level seen. And so that it makes me feel closer to everyone.
Although in a way, the poem that you just read, Dust, is about the opposite, right? Like when that does not happen to you, right?
In some
And
ways,
still,
it comes to you and you just say, you know, I can't deal with this today.
and still you manage to write a hell of a poem on that as well, which is pretty amazing. In a way, in a good way, I hate you for that, you know? If it's okay to say. I wish I could write such a poem about being uninspired sometimes, or not opening the window to God.
Especially when God's so beautiful.
Was it? Yeah.
Right?
Was he a man? Was he a man?
Oh, no, you know, I mean, the only part of that poem that's true to my life experience is that I had a dream in which somebody was talking, but then I woke up and it was gone. And I didn't experience what I wrote next. Right. I just wrote it. I just imagined if I could imagine what a God would look like, that's what it would look like. Right. I had been in my garden the day before, you know, literally moving rocks, trying to make a little, you know, pathway. But really the rest of it just came from this imaginative space. And also I was still kind of half awake. So I think I still had access to whatever it was that I must have been thinking somehow in the dream.
Right.
So I can't reconstruct it, you know, and it feels like I made it up, and yet it also feels true.
Yeah. I'm still amazed by that poem. And I'm thinking about your fascination, which seems to me to be equal, by stardust and the dust beneath the sofa, for example, by the cosmic and the very personal, our laundry and God. And in a way, I was wanting to ask you about that fascination. And I was, maybe we should read our next poem first, which takes us into your car and into some very intimate moment. And it's called Enough Music, but I think still it holds the unknown and the unspoken and the unseen, which I want to ask you about. So if you will read it for us, it's the next one, Atara. Yeah, thank you.
Enough music. Sometimes when we're on a long drive and we've talked enough and listened to enough music and stopped twice, once to eat, once to see the view, we fall into this rhythm of silence. It swings back and forth between us like a rope over a lake. Maybe it's what we don't say that saves us.
Thank you. מספיק מוזיקה. לפעמים כשאנחנו בנסיעה ארוכה, וכבר דיברנו מספיק והזנו למספיק מוזיקה, ועשינו שתי עצירות, אחת לאכול, אחת להתבונן בנוף, אנחנו שוקעים במקצב הזה של שתיקה. היא מתנדנדת בינינו הלוך ושוב, כמו חבל תלוי מעל אגם. אולי אלו הדברים שאיננו אומרים, שמצילים אותנו. I have a few questions about this poem.
So do I, probably.
Okay, let's try. What are the things we don't say? What are they really? I mean, you talk very freely in your poetry about very intimate things, about relationships and marriage and the body and sex and men. Your poems can be so juicy sometimes, yeah, and very generous in a way. Like you let us in a very generous way step inside your mind and your body sometimes, in your home, in your relationships. But here you leave it vague in a way. What are the things? What did you mean by the things we don't say? That's my first question, and then I'll have another one.
Well, especially if you're with someone that you've been with for a long time, and you know them very well, and sometimes it's better just to be quiet with them rather than, for instance, say something that might be disconcerting to them or upsetting, or to even just point out something that's beautiful. You know, why not let them just see it for themselves? And I think silences can be very comfortable between people, and I think that silences can often be uncomfortable, even for people who've been together for a very, very long time. And sometimes not saying something, I think, can be kinder than saying something.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it true always in poetry, do you think? Do you use silent, or do you find silent disturbing or helping you in a way as a poet?
I think every poet is working against silence. I mean, they're working with and against silence all the time. I mean, I feel like if I was a true poet, I would never say a word. I would just let the world unfurl around me and love it and quietly revere it, you know. Because I know, just as we were speaking about before, that we can't really say the thing anyway. So why do we keep butting our head against a wall? Why do we keep trying to say the thing that really is so deeply inside us and so wordless? Why? Why do we do that? Because we have language. We made it up from scratch. That's what humans did. They said, mama, dada, you know, I mean, they finally started speaking. And once they did, they broke that silence. And we have to pay for it now. We have to live with that for the rest of our lives.
You make it sound like a trap, like something we're trapped in a way.
In a way, for a poet, you feel trapped by it because you can't make it do exactly what you want it to do.
Right.
When you say mama, it means nothing like what you feel when you say it. If you say fear, you cannot describe it. You can say terror to show that you mean more than fear, maybe, or right? But it still doesn't approach what the human body feels and thinks when it's terrified.
Yeah.
But you can get close to it. And I think painters feel the same thing. They can never quite capture what it is that they're feeling and seeing, and they can't quite get the color right. The same is true for musicians. They can't quite get, you know. So why do it if you can't make it perfect? It's art. It's supposed to be perfect. But I know there are certain cultures that, like Ming vases, supposedly they always put a little flaw in it so that it won't be perfect, so that it will be true to life.
Right.
Nothing is perfect.
We had a little chat on translation the other day, and you said you think your poems might be easy to translate because they're very pictorial in a way. And I agreed with you until I reread this poem again, and I remembered the thing with the rope over the lake, which is it's a picture I can imagine. However, we don't have lakes in Israel, and the only lake we have is called the sea. That's the Sea of Galilee. We never ever, I don't think we ever hang a rope that hang above the Sea of Galilee. What do you mean? What's that?
Well,
is it good or bad, basically? Yeah.
In here, where we do have many, many lakes all throughout the United States, some are quite small, maybe even like a pond versus a lake, but you know, a large body of water inland. And they're everywhere, and some of them are huge, like they are up in Michigan, Lake Erie, or but usually a small lake in the country will be that's hanging over the lake, and you tie a rope around one of the good solid branches. We'll also have a tire, an old tire, and the children will sit in that tire and swing over the lake. But many lakes just have a rope, and young boys will run and grab the rope and swing themselves out and plop into the lake, right? So it's an image of release, of freedom, right? You grab the rope and you go fly out over the lake and you fall into the water.
So that couple is sitting in the car and they're choosing silence. So it's a good thing, and the rope is a good thing, is a happy thing, is a freedom kind of atmosphere.
It's a freedom, yeah. It's release from talking. Okay. It's release from discussing something or arguing about something, or even having a good conversation, just quiet. Right. Sometimes when we're quiet with each other, maybe that's what allows us to continue, when we can live in that space of not communicating for a moment. I'm not saying all the time, right? Because we've talked enough, we've listened to enough music, we've gotten out and looked at the view, we've stopped a couple times to, you know, it's not as if we haven't been communicating, you know. Right. But maybe sometimes when we don't, that's the deeper, you know, that's what really, I don't know. It
reminds me, I wanted to read The Crossing with you, which I didn't send to Atara, so we don't have that in our presentation. But are you willing to read this for us? The Crossing is what we call I put it translated in my Facebook. It's called Hachatzia, the Shir עם האיילים. And I think it fits here with, do you need the text, or you have it, Dorianne?
I'm looking to see if it's in my new and collected poems. Here.
Are you talking about the crossing?
Yeah,
the crossing.
So do you have it? Yes, we have it in the presentation. We have it.
Oh, good.
I do have it, but yeah.
I like these moments that when I find out I'm more responsible than I thought I am, but I don't think we have it here. Let's see.
Isn't that wonderful?
We do. Yeah. All right, so let's do this one.
Orick is a little town in outside of Oregon, and it's a town that's famous for elk crossing the road. The crossing. When the elk of Orick wait patiently to cross the road, and my husband of 6 months, who thinks he's St. Francis, climbs out of the car to assist. Ghost of St. Francis, his t-shirt flapping, steps tenderly onto the tarmac, and they begin their trek, heads lifted, nostrils flared, each footfall a testament to stalled momentum, gracefully hesitant as a brace of semis lined up, humming, adjust the air in their brakes. They cross the 4-lane like a coronation, slow as a Greek frieze, river wind riffling the wheatgrass of their rumps. But my husband stays on to talk to the one who won't budge, oblivious to her sisters, a long stalk of fennel gyrating between her teeth. Go on, he beseeches, get going. But the lone elk only stares back, their noses less than a yard apart. One stubborn creature staring down another. This is how I know the marriage will last.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a different, that's before I revised the poem. It's an old,
really?
Yeah. And so when it says on the second page, my husband stays on, but the lone elk stands her ground. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I changed it from only stares back.
Stands her ground. All right.
She stands her ground, you know, which is stronger, right? You know?
And so, in Hebrew, it will be stronger. Yeah, let's do it in Hebrew as well.
So that's what I mean by poems never really done. I mean, I published this poem, but then I went back And I said, no, I have to change that.
All right, I'll read the Hebrew translation, החצייה. האיילים האצילים ממתינים בסבלנות לחצות את הכביש, ובעלי מזה 6 חודשים, שחושב שהוא קדוש לפחות כמו פרנסיסקוס, יוצא מהאוטו לעזרתם. רוח הרפאים של פרנסיסקוס הקדוש, החולצה שלו מתנפנפת, צועד בזהירות אל תוך הכביש, והם פוצחים במסע שלהם. ראשים מורמים, נחיריים רושפים, כל צעד עדות לתנופה משתהה, מהוססים בחינניות כמו חיבוק קבוצתי במוקדמות המונדיאל, כולם בשורה אחת, מהמהמים, מכוונים את מעצורי האוויר שלהם, הם חוצים את 4 המסלולים כמו בטקס הכתרה, איטיים כמו איתור על עמוד יווני עתיק. העמוד הבא, רוח מהנהר פורעת את עשבי החיטה של העכוזים שלהם, אבל בעלי נשאר שם, לדבר אל האחת שאינה זזה, מנותקת מאחיותיה. גבעול ארוך של שומר מסתלסל מבין שיניה, בואי, הוא מפציר בה, נזוז, אבל נקבעת האייל היחידה נאחזת באדמה. הנחיריים של שניהם במרחק יריקה זה מזה. יצור עקשן אחד נועץ מבט ביצור עקשן אחר. כך אני מבינה שהנישואים יחזיקו מעמד. So that's it fits the other poem from the car, basically. Shows your wisdom as a young bride, right? Did it really happen?
I was not very young at the time.
Oh, how old were you?
How old was I, honey? 50? 42.
Oh, okay. But still, you know, when I read that, I was around 42, and I thought to myself, right. I was married then for like 13 years, and I said, right, I'm stubborn and he's stubborn, and that's what helps us be here. Then I took your advice about the silence, right? That was the second phase. So now I'm kind of negotiating with the time. We do have a lot of questions, and I do want you to read your recent poem in any event. I wanted us to finish with the uplifting that this poem offers us. So what do you think, Noah? What should we do? Like, should we go to a few questions and then finish with the poem?
What do you prefer?
Noah. I think questions will be nice now.
Okay,
I think we have quite a few.
So yes, so Atara can ask. She collected them and she have all the questions.
Oh, okay. And just leave us a minute for the last poem, which is so beautiful, and I don't want to miss this one.
So we have a question. There are a lot of questions about the song Enough Music. So someone asked, is Enough Music about growing all together?
I don't know. I think so. It could be. It's growing old together, or preparing to grow old together. You know, I mean, maybe it could be for any couple that knows when not to speak, right? And that could even include friends. There are times when your friend says something and you just nod your head and you know it's better not to speak. Maybe that's what will save us if I don't speak. Right? Because you can break things by speaking. You're already breaking into the silence, you know? And so be very aware of what your words, the power of those words.
Mm-hmm. Another question was about naming the song in the poem in that name. What led you to do it, or what does it mean to you?
Enough Music?
Yes, someone asked.
You know, naming poems is hard, and I'm not very good at it often. If I have a poem takes place in a laundromat, I call it the laundromat. You know, I mean, I just am terrible with titles. But with that particular title, I felt like the idea that I'm talking about in the poem, it somehow attaches itself, you know, enough, you know, just be, just let things be, even the music. You know, I don't know. That's what it means, but that doesn't mean anything, really.
There is a question I would like to pick up from here. Is that okay, Atara?
Of course.
Do that?
Yes, of course.
So Ravit is writing, some of your poems, Dorian, could have been written in wonderful pieces, prose. How do you decide what format to choose? What's in your mind makes a piece a poem versus a poetic prose? I'm very interested in that as well.
Yeah, I think part of it is music, is rhythm. You know, that yes, it may be prose, but you read it, or prose-like, but you feel the internal rhythms, you hear the internal rhymes, you see the structure. It's a piece of music. And most of my poems, when I write them, I'm listening to some internal, like the music of the spheres, you know, which isn't necessarily rhymed or, you know, have a rhythm. It just is pulsating, you know.
Right.
And but also trajectory and compression. You know, if you're going to write a novel, well, you have a lot of places you can go, you know, but in a poem you don't. You have to choose very specific details to make it feel like you've read something that is long and expansive and prose-like, but it's not. You know, I mean, it's small. My poems, I don't have a poem that goes over 2.5 pages in length, you know, and so that's still very compressed, considering that many of them tell stories that span decades or span time, you know, in a way.
Do you have the desire sometime to expand and just write something in prose and not limit yourself, or do you ever find limited by the structure of poetry?
I love prose, and I was brought up reading novels, and I loved the novel. But what I loved often most about them was when they became poetic. When in a novel you're reading along and you're reading about someone's life and their psychology and their history and the culture around them and everything is going on. But then there's a moment when the speaker or the narrator stops at the fruit stand and begins looking at the fruit and just starts to be poetic about it, you know.
Right.
The green of the mangoes seemed to bleed off the edges of the, you know, the oranges were brighter than any, you know. And that's when I would get so excited, where they would really stop and look at something for a long time. And with the psychology, I love the psychology of novels and how novelists explain, basically show you how people psychologically think and feel, but really a poem is more about just that moment, the psychological moment, where you suddenly see something. You don't have to know why or how or when or who else, and just that moment. And so I'm much more interested in those aspects of prose. And that's, I think, what makes me a poet, even though I was raised on prose. I mean, I love the rhythms of prose.
I love that explanation. I'm going to be selfish for a moment because I all of a sudden remembered something else I needed to know. I took my 3 girls, for 6 years around the world now. And 6 months ago, we came back because I had this fear. One of the reasons we came back was I had this fear they will not have any sense of belonging, which is a major thing for us Israeli people. We have a strong sense of belonging to the land, to the Jewish people, to our anthem, to everything. We're so belonging. And I recall I read in one of your interviews that you grew up as a child and you have traveled a lot, and you said that you never felt like you belong to anywhere in particular. So I always ask people like you how it influenced them as an adult, but also how it influenced your poetry or your poetic writing. And that will be probably our last question, right? If I look at the watch. Yeah.
Well, I was a daughter of a Navy family. My father moved around a lot because of his work in the Navy. And so we never lived in one place for very long because then he was stationed somewhere else. And And then when I finally moved, and it was San Diego, California, which really is a desert, but they populated it with trees from Australia and palm trees and make it look very tropical. But really, in reality, it's a desert next to an ocean. And so it was a very barren kind of landscape, lots of sagebrush and cactus and lizards and, you know, and it took me to move to Oregon, where I lived teaching for 13 years, to finally feel like I was in one place long enough. And suddenly trees came into my poems. I'd never really thought much about trees because I didn't live in a landscape in which they were so overwhelming to me. And because I lived all up and down the coast of California,
Right.
all the way to Oregon and Alaska, so, and Mexico.
So the landscape is something that you feel more connected to now that you're in the same, right? It's interesting. Okay. So the last poem we're going to be reading takes us back to your cosmic fascination, I think. We're going back to the stardust and to who we are really. And do you want to say a few words about that, or just read it? Up to you.
It's a poem that was written fairly recently, I mean, within the last few months, but before the virus struck. And so I was not thinking of that at all. I was just thinking about all the other horrible things that were going on in the United States at the time. And this poem just came out. I'm not really
It's the next one, Atara. The next one, in any event. Yeah, this one.
And a lot of people in the United States are feeling very depressed and kind of hopeless about much of the situation. Yeah. And so I guess I just wanted to talk about my belief in the next generation, you know, and in human beings in general. So this is called In Any Event. If we are fractured like stars, bred to shine in every direction, through any dimension, billions of years since and hence. I shall not lament the human, not yet. There is something more to come. Our hearts a gold mine, not yet plumbed, an uncharted sea. Nothing is gone forever. If we came from dust and will return to dust, then we can find our way into anything. What we are capable of is not yet known, and I praise us now in advance.
Thank you. איך שלא יהיה. אם אנחנו מתרסקים, אנחנו נשברים לרסיסים, כמו כוכבים. מתנפצים לנצנץ לכל העברים, דרך כל הממדים, מיליארדי שנים, מאז ולעולם. אני לא מתאבלת על האדם, עוד לא. משהו עוד עומד לקרות. הלבבות שלנו מכרה זהב שעוד לא נחקר. ים לא ממופה. דבר לא באמת מסתיים. אם מעפר בנו ואל אבק נשוב, הרי נוכל להשתחל לכל פינה שנחפוץ. יכולותינו לא התגלו עדיין, ואני מהללת אותנו כבר עכשיו, מראש. You know, I read it like a prayer and like a blessing, and every time I read it, I'm kind of being fulfilled again with that something that you said previously, you don't think you know, but if maybe everybody knows. I think you know, Dorianne. And I want to thank you deeply from my heart. If we were in India now, and you were some kind of Kavi, a poet that I was talking to, I would probably go down and kiss your feet. So maybe lucky for you or not lucky for you, we can't do that on Zoom. But imagine that I'm kissing your feet. Thank you for the inspiration, for the wise words and the wisdom. And take good care of you, of yourself and your loved one in this time. And yeah, lots of love from all of us. You're welcome to say bye-bye, everyone, because she sees.
So much. Thank you so much for coming. I wish I could say hello to every single one of you and answer every single question, which I cannot do, but I could try. And because it would be a wonderful conversation no matter what. But I really appreciate this arms across the water, this ability for all of us to be together from every space in the world, and that you left your lives for a few moments to just spend time with poetry and with thinking about your life and your humanity and what it means to be here. I find that to be so moving. And this is why I write. And this is what I write towards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorianne and Maya. And I want to invite you all to participate in our next session that will start in 15 minutes at 8:30 Israel time. Laux Sternberg will host Tony Curtis, who is an Irish poet, and the link is in the chat box. And I really want to thank you. It was a wonderful conversation. And also to the entire staff of the Poetry Place Festival, and Nasha Karji and Gilad Meiri, who are the art directors, and also Ayelet Ashachar Friedland, who's helped me a lot with the production. So thank you all, and see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you,
Atara.